Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and welcome to another video where today we are doing a sort of dark mirror to the video I did yesterday of ranking all the Chaos Lord miniatures that have been released for Warhammer 40k. There was a comment the other day that mentioned they'd like these to be in chronological order, so I went through and ordered these in chronological order to the best of my ability. Not specific dates, more so years. So for example, Abaddon and Karn both came out in 1996, so they're next to each other, and then Doom Rider, the Chaos Lord, came out in 1999, so on and so forth. Aside from that, let's just get right into it. So first up, we have Abaddon the Despoiler, the main War Master of Chaos, of course. This was his first model of two, and was a very long-standing model. If you open up a lot of Chaos Codexes, you'll find this guy surrounded by increasingly large Chaos Space Marines that make him look ridiculous. This model was quite infamous for being where the nickname Armless the Harmless came from, because his arms were notoriously poorly attached to his body with super glue because he was made of metal or resin. Design-wise, I think it's still a solid design because Abaddon's design has not changed at all since he got his glow up into the modern day. Most of his armor detail is still the same. They only really changed his trophy rack and gave him a cape. I think this model is totally fine, though. It's mainly just a product of its time. It doesn't excel like some models from that era do, and it's not horrible like the, Warp Spiders, for example. I think this guy is just perfectly fine, but thankfully he does have one of the best. His character has one of the best models in 40k history with the modern remake of Abaddon that we got. Moving on to almost, 25 years later, but still, he eventually got the comeback. I will be giving him, though, a B tier. He's probably going to be at the very bottom of this tier, but I still think he's a fine model. I own him. I did convert him a little bit because I didn't have all the parts for him. Sitting in storage for, 20 years will do that to a model. But he's fine. I think for his age, he's fine to paint, all that, totally fine. Next up, we have Karn the Betrayer. Out of the original 4 Chaos God-specific characters, I think Karn was the second best of them and somehow the oldest of them. Though, to be honest, it was sort of Aramin, Karn, and Typhus were really good, and then Lucius was just hideous despite being the youngest of them somehow. Karn the Betrayer's model, of course, does have a lot of the 90s things going on. It has extremely exaggerated heroic proportions, which have slowly been toned down a bit in modern times, but I don't think that I can hold that against Karn. His pose is very fitting, his helmet is nice and imposing, and overall I think old Karn, he's still a 90s model, of course, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I will be giving him an A tier. He's quite a fun model, too. Just the overall design of him is quite solid, and his reboot was also quite solid. Next up, we have our first Demon Prince, which technically aren't always Chaos Lords, but I included them anyways. I didn't include Sorcerers, because I figured they're sort of their own category. So no Thousand Sons in this video, but just putting that out there. So Doom Rider is a Demon Prince of Slaanesh who flies around on a bike and cuts people up. His model came out in 1999, I want to say, or 98, one of the two. And is pretty not great. I think that his design isn't, horrific, but it's more so just a very strange model. He's looking backwards, holding his sword up in the air, and just kind of looks like he's not really doing too much. His bike is a little modified from the norm, not too much so, but it does have some blades on the front. And I believe it had its own unique weapons at the time. This guy, though, not a big fan. I think he just kind of looks ridiculous, if we're being totally real. And for that, he's getting a C tier. And I don't have any attachment to the model, which of course is something I can't always help. But I just think this model is kind of mediocre. I think there's a reason Doom Rider is mostly forgotten. I don't even know when the last time he was mentioned, like, lore-wise was. I think it might have been his first appearance in 3rd edition, and then he was pretty quickly forgotten after that. Next up, we have just a generic Chaos Lord, around the same time as Doom Rider, 1999. And this model's pretty solid. He's just a standard generic Chaos Lord for any Legion. He has a power axe and plasma pistol, which is a classic loadout. He's got the horned helmets going on, nice and imposing. He's got a big trophy rack that makes him stand tall above his Chaos Marine brethren, while also giving him a slightly sort of hunched appearance, which is always a little bit of sort of a side effect of having something like that. You know, having with the Custodes, it makes the body himself look smaller, even if he is about the same size as other Space Marines from the time. He's standing on a skull, which is always very good, tactical skull, and he's in a sort of triumphant pose, which I think is always a solid go-to. He's definitely just fine. He's a product of when he came out. I will put him above Abaddon just because I think he went together better. Or at least I've seen this model a few times in person, and I've never seen him without his arms, and no one's ever complained about his arms coming off, so he has that over Abaddon. Moving on, we jump a few years up to 2002, otherwise known as the year I was born. This guy is the Demon Prince, and I have not only painted this model on the channel, I'll admit it wasn't my best work. Some dude in the comments really went off on me for saying, for how I painted it, calling it should have been a crime. I didn't think it was that bad, but that, no big deal. But this model is simply fantastic. For 2002, this is about as a far ahead model as you could get. The pose, I think, is quite solid. It looks like he's squaring up with someone less than him because he's a demon prince. They like to punch down or find, a worthy opponent, depending on what god they may be serving. He's got a nice and imposing jagged sword. He's got a few trophies on his belt, a Necron skull, a Space Marine helmet, and I like the big warp cannon built into his wrist. This is just a really cool design overall, and one of the best aging miniatures ever. The pose and design and details are a little on the soft side, which isn't the most unusual for models of this era, which can make them slightly annoying to paint because the edges of things aren't well defined. I think, though, unsurprisingly, I've made several videos about how much I love this model. He will be getting an S tier. It's just a fantastic model the whole way around, and one that stood the test of time better than almost any on this list, especially from the 90s to like 2010. Past then, of course, we're getting into some absolutely just gorgeous models. But let's move on to a Chaos Sword that came out in the same time period. This guy is pretty cool in my opinion. He's standing on a tactical rock. That's been something that's been going on for a long time. He's got a very unique combi weapon that's sort of a side-by-side configuration, but it has a big piece of armor on the top of it. It almost makes it look like he replaced his arm with a gun, which I think is cool. And he's got a power fist with a Space Marine's helmet in it that he's crushing. And he's got the trophy rack with the banner strung up between it, which I think is, again, always a solid look. He doesn't have a helmet, and of course, being a metal model, good luck getting him one, unless you have a big file. However, I don't think that necessarily holds him back. I think this guy is quite a solid miniature, and a decent evolution over his predecessor, this guy. Next up, we have the 2003, I want to say 2002, Slaanesh Chaos Lord, and Lord Cacophonist This Ain't. This model is simply hideous. The face is the main thing. It's just very, it's almost like banana-shaped, which is just strange. And the Doom Siren on his back is just kind of all over the place. He looks more unwieldy than anything else. And he does not look very lordly, which for the Emperor's Children is just outrageous. He should look ostentatious and fancy. He doesn't really look any fancier than just a Chaos Space Marine with a Doom Siren on his back. Unfortunately, the Emperor's Children are getting their second C, which is definitely a shame. Actually, honestly, I might move these guys down, because they are quite ugly. I'm going to do that. Next up, we have the Night Lord's Chaos Lord / Champion. He went by both names. This guy is a classic Night Lord's miniature, and is just kind of ridiculous, but I kind of like it. He's got these enormous bat wings on his helmet that are just, spooky. His bolter is very strange. While it's hard to see from the size of this picture, his grip is right behind the flamer part, so it's like some sort of strange Uzi configuration, but it's got a top-loaded magazine for the bolter. It's at the very least unique, and he's got a power fist that's pretty standard for the time. I do quite like this guy. He's very silly, and he was definitely around for a long time, which definitely hurts it, because It just made him look so diminutive next to the modern Chaos Space Marines that he was being sold alongside, which definitely does knock some points. But I think that overall he's just a very fun model, which in my opinion earns him a B tier at the very least. Next up, we have a model that I absolutely adore. We have Classic Typhus. This guy came out in 2003, and out of the original God characters, I think he easily looks the best. This is from a very different era of Death Guard, of course. He is wearing Indomitus armor, mainly because everyone did. The different marks of Terminator armor were not really a thing at this point. But he's equipped with a big Man Reaper scythe, and he's in this very low-down, hunched-over position, like he's, he looks very imposing, menacing, and like he's lurking, He just looks far more imposing than modern Typhus. And I think it plays much better with the Death Guard aesthetic that I like, which is leaning a little bit more into the subtle deformities and body horror elements. Well, Typhus doesn't have any of those explicitly. His modern one doesn't either, except for the vents on his power armor. I just prefer the overall pose, I think, is much better for this Typhus, and the overall look, I feel, is far more spooky. I'd be far more scared of running into this Typhus than I would the Night Lord's guy. This guy will also be getting an S tier, and he's a model I've been wanting to get for quite some time. Next up, we have one of the more infamous models on this list that is a lot younger than I thought it was. We have Lucius the Eternal, renowned loser whose superpower is he's so bad at fighting that he has to have a cheat code for when he does lose. This model is very ugly, and it's from 2006, which is just bizarre how this model's 3 years younger than Typhus and Karn and looks worse than both of them. Or 3 years younger than Typhus and 10 years younger than Karn and looks worse than both of them. That has to be some sort of achievement. There's a lot of problems with it. The armor of Trapped Souls is just a little too much going on. His face is very snake-like, which I think is fine. I don't have a problem with that. But the scars are not very coherent, which lore-wise does make sense. He carves those into his own face. But they just kind of look all over the place. For a while, I thought it's just like, oh, since Lucius loses so much, he has all these scars. No, he does that himself, because he's insane. He just looks very bad, in my opinion. Not as bad as the other two Emp's Children we've got down here, so I will be giving him a C tier. But this guy has been long overdue for an update, which he did finally just get. And it's quite a glorious one at that. Next up, we have the Nurgle Demon Prince from 2006, a much better model than Lucius the Eternal. This guy is actually a very interesting kit for a few reasons. So, upon looking at it, you're probably thinking, oh, okay, it's just a Nurgle Demon Prince. But this guy is actually based off of a fan conversion of this guy. If you look at the two of them next to each other, he's not going to be S tier, don't worry. Their poses actually share a lot in common. This arm over here is very similar. It's got the cannon, though it's reshaped into an ant-like flamethrower. He's got the big butcher cleaver. He's got the same sort of ridge for his power pack, though it's replaced with these bubotic horns, if you will. And of course, his face is completely different. But there was a conversion of this from this that was in White Dwarf that they got in contact with and refined it into a full model, which is just really cool. I think this model was hated for a long time. I don't hate it as much as a lot of people do. I think he looks fine. He's definitely, I feel like he was out of place for old Death Guard, but fits better with modern Death Guard. And for that, I'll be giving him a B tier. Next up, we have this guy's from 2006, I want to say, if I'm not mistaken. This is a Chaos Lord and Terminator armor. Pretty short-lived model because he was rather quickly replaced. But this is a very cool model. It's a lot more subdued than your average Chaos Lord. It feels more weirdly refined. Like, this is a thinking man's Chaos Lord. He's wearing a full set of robes. He's got a ornate framing of his helmet, a smaller but still noticeable trophy rack, and he's equipped with a power sword and a combi weapon. Or I think it's just a combi bolter. This model is really cool. And it's one that I only discovered recently, but would love to get my hands on, just because he looks so cool. And I believe he only ever came in metal, so he'd be very easy to find secondhand and then strip in some nail polish remover. or aceton, whatever you want to call it. This guy, though, very cool. A very ahead of his time model that I would love to have in my possession. Next, we're on to 2007, and we have the, this is a Khorne Chaos Lord, or a World Eater's Chaos Lord, who's just fine in my opinion. He looks surprisingly reserved for a Berserker-type Lord. He's, standing up on one rock and heaving his weapon back. Generally, when I think of Berserkers, I'm thinking of something a little bit more fluid in action. Charging forward, swinging their axe down. Of course, he's charging up to do that, but maybe something that's indicating he's going into the swing would have been a little better. I think this design, though, is totally fine. I believe this was a metal model. And overall, I think he's just fine. I'll be giving him a B tier, just ahead of Classic Abaddon. Next up, we have one of the more hideous models on this list, the Chaos Lord with Jump Pack. So this guy was ugly when he came out and was ugly when he left. I think his jump pack and armor is for the most part fine, but his pose is really static. He looks like he's hanging by those spikes on his thing. He's standing on a chaos icon, or floating off of it. He has the sort of talon things you saw on raptors at the time, but they're extremely exaggerated, which just looks bad. This is a very ugly model, and the worst thing of all is his face. He looks like some sort of bizarre, malformed cross between Nosferatu of 1922 and Scream, the painting. This model is absolutely hideous and easily gets another D tier. Next up, we have Huron Blackheart, also very overdue for a new model, but I don't think his model's that bad. I quite like the Hamadryah, or Hamadira? One of those two. I like the sort of iron halo he's got going on. That's more of a Chaos Star on his power pack. I like his unique power fist with the inlaid flamer, which is just a cool thing in general. And this guy's face is pretty malformed, but it makes sense. If you don't know, when Huron went Traitor, we do have his pre-Chaos look later on in this list. He got like half blown up by a Meltablast. And when they reconfigured him, his face kind of got the worst of it. He's got, his skull exposed, lots of augments, to the point where he actually can't wear a helmet, comfortably at least. When he wears it, it's just constantly pressing all that metal into his head. But yeah, no, I think Huron's model is totally fine. Not the biggest fan, and he definitely does need an update. But yeah, it's not the worst. It's not a C tier model. It's more like a B tier. Next up, we have the plastic Chaos Lord and Terminator armor, which I do quite like. I have one of him on my shelf. This guy is pretty solid. He's got a lot of customization. You've got the option for a cape. You can just pose him on his base or on the big rock that's shaped like a Chaos Star. He's got a few different trophy racks. His helmets are really varied and cool. It's not shown here, but I love the four-horned one that's just insanely tall. Kind of looks like a four-necked guitar or something. I will say this model doesn't go together great, especially on one of the legs. If you've assembled this model, you know what I mean. One of the legs just doesn't connect at all, so you have to be very precarious about how you assemble it. But yeah, I quite like this model, of course. He's got a lot of different options. All of his parts look very good. And he's even got a little funny familiar friend, which I am always fond of, like the Hamadryah with Huron up there. This guy will be getting an A tier, personally. Next up, this is Lord Crouton? Definitely not Lord Crouton. This was a Loyalist Space Marine that ended up getting inducted into the Berserkers of the World Eaters fame, of course. This guy's name was Lord Zufor, that's it. I just had to look that up, it was bothering me. So he became a full-on Berserker, ripping up Imperials that he used to fight with. Very cool armor. It's very covered in trophies. My favorite part is on his back. What looks like a back banner is actually the corpse of a commissar that he ripped apart in combat that he wears on his back. He's got a power fist and a power axe. I think he's quite a cool model. The whole Siege of Vrax had quite a lot of cool models, and this guy, Lord Zufor, is definitely one of them. I'll be giving him an A tier. Next up, we have Luft Huron, otherwise known by his better trader name, Huron Blackheart. This was before he got blasted into pieces and became the Red Corsairs, but he was still a traitor, make no mistake. He abandoned the Imperium and started the whole War of Badab, where a lot of people died, and he, of course, became the Tyrant of Badab. That's where he got his title. Which, interestingly enough, that only reason he was called that was because in the Rogue Trader rulebook, there was a few quotations to a man named as the Tyrant of Badab, and they were like, "Yeah, we should go back to that." So they made Huron Blackheart, or Luft Huron in this case. He's wearing Terminator armor, so bonus points for that. He's got a heavy flamer and a power claw as his main weaponry, so very cool, very almost Custodes-like loadout. And I think this model is very cool. This guy was not limited edition, but a lot of these old Forge World models can be a little tough to find. But I wouldn't mind having this guy and using him as a Huron Blackheart, mainly just because this model is getting pretty old, and also I think is out of production at this point. Luft Huron, though, I will be giving him an A tier as well. Not quite as high as the others, mainly because he's still pretty loyalist in this appearance, even though he is full trader at that point. Though he isn't dedicated to any of the Dark Gods at that point. Next up, we have one of the more disappointing model upgrades, or side downgrades. This is the 2010 Demon Prince of Chaos. This guy was a replacement for our good friend up in S tier, and was not a particularly well-liked miniature. He did have a lot of options, which is nice. A bunch of different heads. You had the options to build him with armor, no armor. Also, one thing I didn't like about this guy specifically was his armor didn't cover his entire body. Like, it didn't wrap around the back. It just abruptly cut off at the side, which was weird. So that's definitely a downside. Another downside is the general art direction feels a little out of place, even for the time it came out in. He's very cartoonish in design, which if you look at the era he came out in, is just, it's out of place. This is the same year, Luft Huron came out. It's also just before the Chaos Space Marines got their big revival in 6th edition with the Dark Imperium box, which just made this guy stick out like a sore thumb. His face is very, again, just like a cartoon devil. All of his faces are like that, to be honest, though one of them is better than the others. And his pose is very mediocre. While I myself never brought myself to buy one of these, my local store owner did, and he said assembling it was not very good either. Can't say I'm a fan of this model. It's very, very... It's not, it's not as ugly as these guys, but it is getting C tier. I just think it doesn't fit the aesthetic of either Warhammer Fantasy or Warhammer 40k, which was part of the reason they did this, because this guy is, this is a Chaos Space Marine. Like, you can't... This guy doesn't fit into Warhammer Fantasy, but that was just done much better by the sequel to this model, who is mysteriously absent from our lineup. Hold on, let me grab him. Alright, we're back. I got him. As I was saying, this was much better achieved by his successor. And this kit is just very mediocre, and I'm glad it's gone, and in my opinion, mostly forgotten. Moving on, we have, as I mentioned, the resurrection of Chaos Space Marines in 6th edition, with the revival and reimagining of the Chaos Space Marine aesthetic with Lord Cranon. This guy was, again, Loyalist Space Marine that went traitor, and was in the starter box for 6th edition, He's a very cool model. His armor has just the right level of chaos mutations going on, as does his plasma pistol. It's got a couple eyes opening on it that fit very well. The giant horns on his helmet fit very well. The trim has gone from just kind of a faint idea to something fully refined into a staple of the design, becoming much thicker, more defined, and their armor becoming more mismatched and baroque, in a attempt to show that, well, a lot of these guys, even if they are modern traders, are often patching their armor up with random pieces from whatever loyalist or trader they kill, which just is a really cool look that adds a lot of visual variety to the Chaos Space Marines. And his giant sword, this whole pose is just fantastic. Unfortunately, don't own this model, but I would love to own him at some point. Probably use him as a chosen. This is still the era of comically small bases. I mean, look at this guy. His feet are sticking off the side. So you definitely have to fix that. But this guy is really cool. And if they ever bring Dark Imperium back for a made-to-order run, I'd probably pick it up. This is also the same box where Hellbrutes made their appearance, replacing the archaic Chaos Dreadnought. And also where Chaos Cultists really got their start as something consistent. They had usually been sort of like an Alpha Legion exclusive thing in previous codexes. Sometimes, of course, I don't have all the codexes, though that might be a fun video to do, reviewing the evolution of the Chaos codexes. Anyways, this guy, though, easily getting a S tier. He's just so cool. Next up, we have Karn the Betrayer, the update to the Classic. This guy looks fantastic. His armor is significantly more unique. He is insanely brawlic, even by Space Marine standards. I love the swinging chains with the mace ends on them, and his pose is just invoking a lot of motion. I think Karn is just a fabulous model. That was one of the most successful reboots ever done by the Forces of Chaos, one could say. Yeah, fantastic model, easily getting A tier. Next up, we have the exclusive Lord of Contagion from the 8th edition launch box. This model is really good. I think this is the pinnacle of modern Death Guard aesthetics, having quite a nice balance between heavy armor and a little bit of exposed rotting flesh. Obviously his stomach is disemboweled and dripping out. His axe is really cool, being sort of a mix between a power axe and a chain axe, as it has the big bubotic blade, but also a bunch of inset spinning blades. And his icon on his back just adds a lot of motion to the model, which, the Death Guard tend to be quite ponderous, so it's nice to have something that indicates that he's slow but moving forward. I do quite like this model. When it comes to modern Death Guard, he's probably one of my favorites, and he will easily be getting an A tier. Next up, we have Modern Typhus, one of the few models I'd consider just a straight downgrade from their previous incarnation. Pose is not exactly what I would call great. It's very, I don't know, it feels like he's not in a pose. Like, it's just strange to me that they went from this low down and posing about a scythe you pose to a leaning back with your scythe in the air kind of pose. And also he went from Indomitus to Cataphractii armor, which in my opinion looks worse. Yeah, it's just a shame. I'll probably be giving him a C tier. Not a fan of Modern Typhus. Lord Felthius is a really silly name. Not a bad model. He's got a very stumpy looking Man Reaper. He's holding the Orb of Slop. That's what I'm going to call it. He's got a burnt up cape, which is always a cool look. And he's got a big wide grin on his face that I think actually fits pretty well. His face is very fat and his mouth is uncomfortably wide, which fits into the sort of unsettling aesthetic while still being a little bit silly. I'm still not the biggest fan of this model, but I will be generous and give it... Nah, I'm just going to give it C tier. I don't like Death Guard for the most part, so it's no surprise. Next up, we have Obsidious Malix from Blackstone Fortress. This is a monopose Black Legion character with a Demon Hammer and Plasma Pistol. His power and aside from that, really not much more to say. He could easily pass for a sergeant. I don't think there's anyone that's going to be arguing with me about that. He's fairly generic, as expected to be with Black Legion. He's got a cape and a bit of a bear fur trophy going on, which is definitely nice. But the restricted and mediocre pose is definitely holding this guy back from greatness, but I still think he's a fine option. I'll be giving him a B tier. Next up, we have the reimagined Abaddon the Despoiler, who is just a magnificent model. I have not painted mine. It's one of those models where I'm like, I need to make sure I'm good enough at painting to do this, when in reality I should just paint it. Because remember, everything is far easier to do than it may appear when it comes to painting. That's what I have to tell myself. I've really gotten out of the habit of painting consistently. But regardless, Abaddon's model is fantastic. It's one of the most detailed models ever made. One thing I'm not sure a lot of people know if they don't have the model is under his chest plate is actually the inner workings of Terminator power armor. They have you assemble him and then place the armor plates onto him as if you were armoring the man himself. I think that's cool, even though you'll never see the details, and they'll probably, I'd say 99,000 times out of 99,999 times out of 10,000, completely unbanked. But it's just a cool piece of detail that adds an extra bit of depth to Abaddon's design. I like the few options you get. You get the option of a head with a rebreather on. You get the option of the cape or no cape. And of course, his pose is just fantastic. It fits for the War Master of Chaos. He's very imposing. He looks like he's, raising... He's using his the Talon of Horus to, raise hell, metaphorically, I guess. Or literally, if you consider the Immaterium hell. Abaddon's model, is anyone surprised where this guy's going? He's going in S tier. And as much as it hurts me, I have to put him below the Chaos. I have to put him above the Chaos Prince, Demon Prince. He's just probably about as close to perfect as a model can get. He's one of the greatest models ever made. Next up, we have another very strong contester, the Lord Discordant on Hellstalker. This guy is a Chaos Lord. I thought he might be a sort of Warpsmith, but no, he is a Chaos Lord. This guy's awesome. He does, of course, have a bit of unfair advantage, having a giant spider or lobster demon to ride upon. But hey, that's the way it goes. This guy's model is just fantastic. He's got a big chain glaive. He's pulling the Hellstalker, sorry, the word was escaping me for a moment. He's pulling it into a turn. He's, of course, very imposed. He's got the robes going on that give him a sort of wandering nomad type vibe. And he, just in general, is very, very imposing on the tabletop. Wish he was better. Lord Discordant has, of course, been very good in the past, so, pretty much every unit has its time where it's good and then when it's bad. But, I just wish he was better right now. This guy, though, there's no surprises here. He's easily going in A tier. Personally, I prefer my characters on foot to on vehicle in most circumstances. But this guy's just so good. He easily could be up here. But I just, I prefer these guys. Next up, we have the Lord of Virulence. This guy's wearing Indominus power armor, which is a nice change of pace. He's the sort of master of artillery for the Thousand Sons. Thousand Sons. What am I saying? For the Death Guard. He's equipped with a Plague Spewer and a big dripping Power Fist, which is very cool. This model is so close to being awesome, and then he's got this weird belly hanging out. And I just don't like that. I want my Plague Marines encased in rotting armor, where there's cracks where you can see their flesh, not that their flesh is just hanging out. It just doesn't do it for me. This is definitely one of the better Death Guard models, but it's still probably just going to be paired up with the rest of them down here. Next up, we have the most recent Demon Prince. This guy is a completely worthy successor to 2002, a perfect update pretty much. Lots of unique fiddly bits with building him. I have dropped mine probably 6 times. Pure stupidity on my part, by the way. I'm not saying it's a poorly balanced model. I just had it sitting on my desk and then accidentally hit it off, and then it was on my painting desk, and then I accidentally hit it off, and then I dropped it when I was putting it in the case. I just have bad luck with it, but I'm getting a new one with Combat Patrol, so maybe that one won't see the same fate. And in general, of course, this model is just fantastic. Very imposing, very scary. I love the warp cannon on his arm. The power pack looks fantastic. The base is great. I love the big stone he's standing on. I really can't complain. This is another symbol of just how good Chaos Space Marine models have been in the last decade. Easy S tier. And I'm not going to let nostalgia blind me. This is the better version of this model. But it is a very, very worthy redesign of this model. Next up, we have the World Eater's Lord on Juggernaut. This guy, I love the idea, but he just doesn't feel lordly enough. Thankfully, his alternate build does. But this guy looks more like he would just be a, Berserker on Juggernaut, which is a unit that World Eaters desperately need, by the way. It's just very, very strange. Very cool kit, I'm not going to deny that. Juggernaut looks fantastic. It's nice to see a modern update to Juggernauts. before the corn demons get them, whenever that may be. Yeah, this guy's solid, but just solidly just. I'll be putting him right here. That's too low. I'll put him at the top of B tier, but that's as high as he goes. Next up, we have Lord Invocatus, who pretty much solves all the problems I have with the normal Lord on Juggernaut. He's flying forward, axe held back. He looks like he's about to pounce over someone. His helmet is completely unique. Lord Invocatus looks awesome. His lore is really cool because he literally flies. His Juggernaut can fly on a giant wave of fire. The giant chain blade on his Juggernaut is very cool. And this model in general just looks fantastic. I've seen him on the tabletop a few times. Can't wait to get him. Definitely going to paint him up in Alpha Legion colors. Because, why wouldn't I? Probably keep the Juggernaut black, though. I think that is a very sleek look that adds nice visual contrast to the bright red of good old Invo. Yeah, this guy looks fantastic, though. I cannot sing his praises high enough. This guy is easily getting an A tier, right up there with Karn. Next up, we have the very modern Chaos Lord. This guy is very much a fusion of quite a few. You know, there's definitely a lot of pieces from him. One of his trophy racks looks pretty similar to this guy. And overall, this guy's been a long time coming and looks fantastic. Nice use of tactical rock, in my opinion. I think the pose is right. It's not charging forward, but it's sort of in the come at me stance, you know, where you have your arms out to the side. It looks like he's inviting a challenge or overlooking his army. Which is always a good look, in my opinion. Love this model. I don't have him, mainly because I just use my Praetors from Horus Heresy as a Chaos Lord, but I've seen him countless times at the store. And I definitely do need to pick him up, because he's really cool. And I already have, 3 Chaos Lords? What's one more? And one of them's a Terminator. Oh no, 2 of them are Terminator armor. I have 4 Chaos Lords, actually, because I have 2. I have my Praetor, and then I have a third-party model, and then I have the Plastic Chaos Lord and Terminator armor, and the Terminator Praetor from Horus Heresy. Anyways, yeah, this guy, though, absolutely fabulous model. Couldn't be happier. Feels like the logical evolution of the Chaos Lord. And I will be putting him right in front of Typhus. Next up, we have the Jump Pack variant, who I also think is quite solid. This guy does have some nice weapon options. Pose is okay. I think it could be maybe slightly better, but when I think of that, it'd pretty much just be Harken World Claimer, and if they were the same pose, that could get a little confusing on the table. And this pose isn't bad by any means. I do like the Smoke Trail. That is infinitely better than the old Flying Bases, and infinitely better than old standing on your tippy toes over here. Yeah, this guy, though, I think looks very, very good. And I will be giving him a A tier as well, personally. I like this guy more. Next up, we have the Lord Exultant of the brand new Emperor's Children, and this guy looks fantastic. Not only is he a great model for your Emperor's Children, he's going to be great as a Slanesh Chaos Lord, just for normal Chaos Space Marines. That's one of the things I really do like about the Emperor's Children. For the most part, these units could fit right in to your normal Chaos Space Marine army. But yeah, this guy just looks fantastic. I'm pretty sure he has a couple of, why can't I think, weapon options. But the helmet is very fancy. Yeah, he does. I just had to look that up to be sure. He's got quite a few. This is the coolest looking loadout, though, with the spear and the fist. Is really cool. I'm glad to see Power Spears have made their return to 40k with the Emperor's Children. Who else? Of course, they have used them the most in the Heresy. Yeah, this model, though, is just fantastic. I'm going to drop him right next to our generic Chaos Lord. Next, we have New Lucius, who looks fantastic. They toned down the suit of Tormented Souls, which I think is a good idea. It's not quite as insane as it once was. And I think the idea of incorporating the Lash of Torment in was a great idea. If you didn't know, if you look here, the Lash of Torment is coming out of the mouth of one of the faces. And he's holding it and whipping it around, of course. I think this kind of scarred up face isn't as intense as classic Lucius, but it gets the idea across better, and his insane expression also gets the idea across a lot better. The Drukhari combat stims look far more fitting for the Emperor's children. It makes sense that he would, have them be a bit more ornamented. The Blade of Lair looks great. Love the base with the Dead Iron Hands Space Marine on it. Yeah, this guy is just fantastic. Easily an A tier. I'm probably going to drop him behind Lord Invocatus just because I kind of like him more. Next up, we have the Lord Cacophonist, who is such a cool model. So the helmet isn't here, but the reason I love this guy so much is he's wearing a helmet that we don't really see with Chaos Space Marines anymore. It's this very exaggerated skull design. Not like a chaplain, but like the top half of it's a skull and the rest of it's normal. And if you look at him, he's got that helmet going on, which I just love, because that helmet was one of my favorites from the classic Chaos Space Marine lineup. And it's one that I really wish would come back. And it did with this guy. And also his Doom Siren just looks properly, insanely huge. And Akimbo sonic pistols is just awesome. It looks very much like he's encumbered by his weapons, which makes sense. I mean, you see that thing? It's as tall as he is. But there's something that just fits the Emperor's Children so well about that. This guy's Doom Sirens is just pointing in a bunch of random different directions, and the weight isn't conveyed in the model. With this guy, it looks like, despite the fact he'd probably be better off carrying it by his arms, he simply refuses to do so, and just, thanks to his pride, is like, this may be destroying my back, but I'm still going to do it. Even though he's a Space Marine, that's not a problem. But I think it's just a very, very subtle but very clever piece of storytelling in a miniature. Yeah, love this guy. Here's the thing. Before the new Emperor's Children got revealed, I was going to be like, they were my least favorite Legion. But these guys are so tempting. So tempting. I have to see if their combat patrol... Oh, no, we already saw it, didn't it? No, we saw their army box. But yeah, these guys are so great. I can't wait to get the new Noise Marines. They just look fantastic. They nailed the Emperor's Children so well. This guy, easy S tier as well. And then finally, we have the Lord of Pox, which is a nice point to end on. Because this guy, I feel, strikes a much, much better balance between the silliness and over-exaggerated mutations of most Death Guard, and brings in some of that imposing, dread-filled stance we've got going on. So he, of course, has the bizarre tank on his waist that's getting filled up with the machine on his back, which is nice. It looks huge and cobbled together, and he's carrying a humongous weapon that looks like it would be extremely sluggish and unwieldy to use. This guy easily takes the cake as my favorite Death Guard miniature. It just feels like it's far more of what I want from Death Guard. He looks more imposing, more brooding than sort of joyous and silly. And I think it's just a great update. This guy will probably serve as the sergeant in my eventual Death Guard or Plague Marine squad. Who knows when I'll make that? I'd want to get the Forge World Plague Marines. But yeah, this guy, finally, Death Guard is getting something good. I'm going to put him probably right up here in front of Lucius. So one of the highest rankings he could get. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.